Nagano, located northwest of Tokyo, about 1 hour and 45 minutes away by the Shinkansen, is home to the deepest inland point in Japan, and it's also the prefecture that borders the most number of other prefectures around it. And in spite of this, the prefecture with a basketball for its flag is known for being one of the most isolated prefectures in Japan as well, and this is due to the fact that it's surrounded by mountain ranges on all sides, with 9 of the 12 tallest mountains in Japan being within this prefecture as well. Being home to such a huge mountain range, it is also famous as a winter sport destination, being where the 1998 Winter Olympics was held. It is also known for its scenic natural beauty and the many hot springs that dot these mountains. And with this comes the many Japanese inns known as ryoukans, which make these mountains their home as well. And it is at one of these ryoukans that this journey of misadventure and pizza begins. Our journey begins at Nagano Station on the second week of January, where I met up with a group of friends who had been, up to this point, touring most of Western Japan. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join them because I was busy with work, but I did promise them that I would try to get them a more interesting experience that you wouldn't really be able to get if you were off touring Japan on your own. And so I decided, why not take them into the mountains of Nagano and experience one of these ryokans for themselves as well. And so we met at the station and moved on to another station near to that station where you would take a different train that would take you to a different station. And from that station, you would then be able to take a bus that would take you up into the mountains. Along the way, during the second train ride, the further you get from the main city, the more you'll see the great expanse of both greenery and mountains. And there's just something humbling about seeing the mountains all around you like that. Like, it really gave me a sense of the isolation that you feel from the rest of the world when you live in a prefecture or a location like this where no matter where you look around you, you see the mountains like a wall keeping you in. But anyway, it is at this end destination where we'll get on the bus that will take us up to the ryokan in the mountains. I say bus, but then again, it's really just a passenger vehicle meant to seat about 7 people, so it really wasn't all too big, but just due to the fact that we were able to take such a small vehicle up the mountain, it really gave quite a good scenic view of the trip up the mountain as well. But little did we know that at this point, we had already made one very, very fatal mistake, and that would lead to the misadventure that would end up with us walking 6 hours just to get pizza on the mountains of Japan. Why were we even trying to get pizza on the mountains of Japan again? I don't really remember anymore. It's a trip, that much is for sure. Although I, at this point, question why we even did it in the first place anymore. But it is at this point where we finally reached the location of the ryokan itself. Which, for those of you who do not know what a ryokan is, if you've watched any Japanese anime or drama, you might have noticed this one hotel-ish place, which is very Japanese style with a tatami floor. The areas where they just sleep on futons on the floor with the huge spacious bedrooms. They also have hot springs that they chill in. This is basically one of those, except that unlike those, the one we went to is a bit more of a modern-ish one. So what you get is a more lodge-looking place, like something you would see more in the West, perhaps, where the floors are wooden. You have flame furnaces in the lobby, and you have people who are typically there wearing shoes everywhere instead of actually swapping into separate sandals or slippers that they can only use within the location itself. Though contrary to the exterior and the lobby of the building, the rooms were actually very traditional and very grand as well. It's very spacious. This is something you would never get within Tokyo itself. Compared to the tiny toilets that you basically have to sleep in Tokyo, this is extremely spacious. And the traditional Japanese chic of the room was just, as long as you ignore the fact that there's a television, a refrigerator, as well as an air purifier as well. But hey, if all of this wasn't there, it probably would be quite hard to live in the mountains, it feels like. So after settling into our room and exploring the rest of the ryokan, we were told that the ryokan would actually be providing both breakfast and dinner, and that dinner would be around 6 p.m. So having settled in and gotten everything done by 4 p.m, we did what any other sane and reasonable adult would do, and decided to walk to a rather scenic waterfall located an hour away. And this is where we finally realized the horrible mistake that we had made. This means that the area is gonna be very sparse in terms of transportation, and it also means that cars are gonna be the one best way to travel around the area. You can see where the issue begins here, because at that lodge itself, the Ryoukan, there actually isn't anywhere that you can actually rent a car, which means that the only way we could get there was literally through that 1 hour 15-minute walk along the side of the road the entire way there, which it was very terrifying considering the fact that most of it is just highways and the like. So the wonderful thing, the good news, is that the views was stupendous. Like, it was really just wonderful being able to see like the glorious mountains all around you. I don't know, like, even for me, this is something that you really don't get to see very often, being up on the mountains and just getting a full view like this. So it was a very enjoyable experience. The weather was surprisingly not too cold. At least it didn't feel too cold in spite of the fact that it was 4 degrees out. And just due to the fact that most of these mountains were untouched by, well, human intervention, most of it still looks very pure and wonderful, like when you look down into the streams below, or even to the mountains in the distance, which there are actually no roads on. It all feels very humbling. But this is where we came across the second very big mistake we made that we had severely underestimated. And this is why I would at this point recommend that if anyone ever decides to come to Nagano to tour, please make sure you drive if you're going to the mountains. Don't do what we did and take a bus up there without any preparation whatsoever. You are going to want to drive, because what we realized is that 1 hour according to Google Maps, it sounds like a reasonable timing, but with how much the snow had piled up, this ended up taking almost double the time. Like, we had actually walked for a good 1 hour 30 minutes, only to realize we weren't there yet, to check the map and realize we were only half of the way there, and that if we had continued on, we wouldn't make it back in time for dinner. So we had to give up halfway through to make sure we get back to the Ryoukan in time, especially before the sunset, since as many of you who live in a winter country would know, the sun sets early in winter, and as you can see from the video, the mountains don't have any lightings along the sides of the road, so it would be very dangerous to walk back in the darkness. So, being sane and reasonable adults, we actually turned back after walking for 1.5 hours. Okay, maybe we can leave out the sane and reasonable part, but as adults that were kinda reasonable, we decided to turn back. So the dinner was great. Like, as you have seen, if you have watched any anime or any TV dramas or just documentaries in general, ryokans in Japan tend to give very luxurious meals, and indeed the meal was so filling that for a long part of it I felt like I could not actually finish everything they give. The food was extremely good as well. Like, the meat was of high quality. The fish was very unique as well, because unlike most prefectures in Japan which gets their fish from the sea, being a landlocked prefecture with its own source of fish, most of the fish actually comes from rivers and lakes as well. And as a result, they tend to tout the fish as having a very different taste. And indeed, if you have lived in Japan long enough, you can really get a sense that the fish just has a very different taste to it, just because of the fact that it has grown up in a completely different type of fresh water instead of the usual salt water of the sea. They will also source pretty good meat, I think, from outside of the region. And within the region, they actually have their own unique chicken as well, which you'll see more of later, which also has a very interesting taste to it. On top of that, they were also serving horse sashimi, which many people will probably reel at the thought of, just like, "Ugh, you're gonna eat raw horse? What the fuck's wrong with you?" I get that, but you have to understand, it's actually very common within Japan, although maybe more among the boomers, I guess, like people like olds, and me apparently, so I guess I'm a boomer as well. It's pretty alright. The taste, it's healthy. You won't die from eating it if you eat it in properly registered place in Japan. You'll probably be fine, since I don't think it has as much health risk as fugu. But it really does have a very unique taste, and being a high quality ryokan, they also gave rather high quality horse sashimi, so that was a very interesting experience at least. So no, normal, safe. Maybe safe for the most part. But yeah, the food came in multiple courses. It was your standard Japanese luxury meal-ish sort of place, where you have 6 to 7 courses for a single meal, which maybe it's really just me growing old at this point, but it was really extremely filling, to the point that trying to finish all of it was a struggle, especially with the horse sashimi on top of that. But hey, we did it. Okay, I'm not that old, thankfully. And so after the meal, the next thing we decided to do was to go to the outdoor onsen. Now, some of you might have already picked up on this by now, but yeah, we did go to an outdoor onsen in the mountains in the middle of winter, which means we will be outside naked for the most part, which being in the onsen itself is great, but the preparation to get into it was quite a hellish experience to say the least. Like, one thing I have not mentioned till now is the fact that for the most part the entire ryokan is built to be very well heated. Like, I'm actually questioning whenever I walk through it, like how much money they spend on heating, cause the inside of the ryokan is actually warm enough for you to walk around in the clothing that they give, which, as you can see from the video here, is not exactly all that thick. And so while that does work within the very well heated, almost 23, 24 degree ryokan, the moment you walk out of the ryokan towards the outdoor onsen, things just get a lot less tolerable, I guess you could say. As you can see from the video of the outdoor onsen here, it's like you can see the snow piled up on the roof on the side, and then you just have the onsen itself like beside it, just there. So you would have to basically get naked outdoors, clean off your body, because it's typically a norm to like wash off your body before you enter the ryokan. So you would have to get naked, douse yourself in water, rinse your body, and then get into it. And since the outdoor temperature is about 4 degrees and the onsen itself is about 35 to 40, or maybe more, there's no thermometer there so I couldn't check, but typically onsens are around 40 or more, so like there's this huge like temperature difference which causes your body to just burn up the moment you try to get into it, which it takes a while to get used to. I'm just glad my balls didn't freeze off in this cold there. But yeah, the difference in temperature actually makes sitting in it and just enjoying the view and weather around you to be pretty enjoyable, although getting out was slightly more tolerable just because your body is a bit more warmed up by that point. But overall, I would say it was a very enjoyable experience. The only problem is just the fact that, like, perhaps going in the middle of winter, as someone who isn't too used to this, was quite the brain expanding experience to say the least. Though even then, after getting out of the onsen, we still had to go to the normal shower room, which is your usual shared shower, since the rooms within the ryokan don't exactly have a private shower, so you would have to go to the public one and then share it with everyone, just like clean off your body for real this time, a second time around. But after that, we went back up to the first floor and we got some milk. For those of you who watch those TV dramas or animes, you might notice that this looks very familiar, and yes, it is designed to look like that. And we got 2 bottles of it and just went back and drank that. It's good milk. Unfortunately, there's no table tennis in the ryokan itself. But with that, we just spent the rest of the day sitting in the room, or the night at that point, since it was about 9 to 10 p.m. We just spent the rest of the night watching very questionable TV dramas before finally passing out as we prepared for the third biggest mistake that we will make within the trip. The breakfast was also very extravagant. Like, I don't think I've eaten a breakfast this extravagant in my life. And we had it for 2 days as well. Like, the breakfast in this place were it felt like I was eating a meal as heavy as a dinner. Like, as someone who typically either does not eat breakfast or eats a very simple breakfast, having a breakfast that felt like a 5-course meal was a very interesting experience, although it felt very overly filling as well. Though then again, considering the journey we were about to go to after this, I guess it kind of made sense that we ate as much as we could. So, day 2 of the trip, instead of going further up the mountain this time, we decided we would go in the opposite direction in hope that the roads were more pedestrian friendly. No prizes for guessing how that turned out. And decided to visit a bunch of shrines along the way while making our way down towards what was supposed to be an onsen swimming pool further way down the mountain. Although, like, from the estimations we got, the entire trip down the mountain would take about 1 hour as well, so it was a very long trip, and so we planned to leave early to get there to enjoy the onsen swimming pool. Problem is, we also found out on that day that since lunch isn't provided, we would have to go and source our own lunch, which means that we would have to find a place to eat outside. Problem with this is that, as you can imagine, from an area that's basically the equivalent of American suburbia in the mountains, there aren't exactly many shops you can go to. Like, even within the town we were in, you had 2 souvenir shops, and one mixed Japanese food place. Like it's literally like the equivalent of going to another country and going to a place that just says it serves Japanese food. Like they just serve a bit of everything, which probably means they didn't do anything well. So we decided to look for something interesting to eat instead. And that's when one of my friends pointed out that further down the mountain, there's actually a Japanese fusion pizza place along the way towards the onsen swimming pool place. And so we decided that our trip for the day would be to visit the multiple shrines along the way, make it to the pizza place before it closes, eat there, and then head to the funny onsen swimming pool park place. And the fact that there was actually snowing on the day really didn't help much at all with the whole trying to like traverse the mountain thing. Although, thanks to that, the sides of the road were even more snowed in than before, so there was actually a kind of like a pedestrian crossing even though it was a highway bridge, and we managed to just like stand on that side where cars could not pass and just, well, take in the view as well as record most of it like you see here. So a large part of the trip then involved us just walking along once again the snow encrusted sides of the mountain, but with how unstable the ground was, it made progress kind of slow just due to the fact that because we couldn't tell what we were stepping into, we had to really be careful, and it also took more time to just lift our legs since there were times where the snow actually went knee deep as well. And the worst part is just due to the fact that you can't really see what you're stepping into. There were times where we actually stepped into a ditch once or twice where we actually sank like waist deep into the ground, which was not fun trying to get out of that. So yeah, things could get quite difficult as a result, and we actually ended up taking way more time trying to get to our destinations. Needless to say, like most of the land was untouched by, well, human intervention. You do have highways and the like, but for the most part, many of the areas that you can see are either forests in the distance or like the wonderful postcard image that is typically used for the mountain over here. And one other thing you will notice as well, being this high up the mountain, is the fact that although we passed by many different residential areas along the duration of our trip, you don't really see many people at all. Like I think during the entire 6 hours of walk, 3 hours down and 3 hours up, we only came across 4 people walking alongside close to their own home. So it's very deserted, and it really gave a very humbling feeling. I feel like I've used that word multiple times before, but like when we were traveling through some of the other towns and villages as well, when we went to the one where it was on the highest point we could get to up the mountain without going into a hiking trail, from where the shrine was, you could really get a view of the entire mountain all the way down like that. It was a wonderful view, but it also slightly terrified me as well. Not so much because of acrophobia sort of thing, but just due to the fact that deep inside, like standing up on high up on that mountain, it terrified me a little that like part of me felt that if I were living in this location in the mountain like this, in a community that's largely self-sustaining, not so much in terms of the individual villages, but as a prefecture that is largely more or less able to sustain most of what it needs, the mountains all around really did give you a feel of like how small we were compared to even just this one small prefecture within Japan. But yeah, after that we were just like continuing on our journey. We passed by many other villages, passed by quite a few shrines and many wonderful scenic views while walking along the sides of the highway at times, which was still terrifying, looking for ways to cross this very pedestrian unfriendly, well, region altogether, which once again, please get a car if you come. Do not do the stupid thing we did. It was quite irresponsible as well, you could say. I understand that, but this is what I'm telling you now. Like, as someone who did it, don't do it. It's not worth the risk. Like, we were lucky to come out unscathed. The two of them probably very experienced from their time in America as is, so walking along like off trail areas as well as on the side of highways, please don't do that. as far as possible. After a lot of scenic walking and walking and walking and walking, we finally did it. A pizza place in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of Japan. Why did we eat pizza in the middle of Japan's mountains again? Well, whatever. It was an interesting experience to say the least. Like the pizzas they had there, the sizes were pretty small, but the prices were quite affordable, I guess. All things considered. Like they had a very huge variety of dessert pizzas and fusion pizzas. You would have like shirako, which is like a very small white fish, or like wakame pizzas and stuff like that. Like they would merge a lot more Japanese ingredients into the pizzas to give it a different taste. Although the dessert pizzas were a bit questionable, like instead of using like a just the crust with a dessert topping on top, they actually put like cheese and like tomato into it. Like they literally made a normal pizza and then coated it with chocolate or like everything else on top. So yeah, a cheese tomato tiramisu pizza is probably not how it was meant to be made as a dessert pizza, but that's what we got. So I guess. Although the thing that worried me more than the pizza itself was probably just the fact that like there was a small shelf of books in the pizza shop, and I'm pretty sure like most of the shelf was filled with either conspiracy theory books or COVID denial books, which was kind of worrying. Like I can kind of understand in my head that perhaps by virtue of the fact that they live in the mountains so isolated from most of the population, that when the lockdowns happened, they would be near completely unaffected by all of this, since no one would, well, be coming in contact with anybody close enough to probably get the disease. So it is easier for people to foster this image of the disease not being a big deal. But seeing like an entire shelf of COVID denial and like conspiracy theory books, as well as things for other types of conspiracy theories as well as it was a bit worrying. Like I was just hoping that like as a foreigner in that store they wouldn't like start saying weird shit or something, like try to spook and chase us out. Like fortunately the staff was very friendly, and I'm very grateful for like the lady who worked at the store. I don't know if she's the owner, but the lady who worked there was extremely friendly and nice to us, and the pizzas were great. So it was a very enjoyable meal, although yeah, like a part of all of us in the pizza store was just like, you could feel the sweat running down, like, oh shit, this isn't gonna end up like us being put into a cult or something, is it? Yeah, I didn't expect to see like COVID denial stuff in Japan written by Japanese people, but that's a thing that existed. So whoa, that was an experience, I have to say. But at least once we were done with that, we could like continue our wonderful journey towards the onsen swimming pool. Although it was at this point that we realized our very massive miscalculation, and that by virtue of the fact that it took almost double the time to get down the mountain than we thought it would, the 2 hours we were planning to spend in the onsen swimming pool were basically non-existent anymore, due to the fact that it was all gone by the time we had walked down the mountain all the way to the onsen swimming pool. So we just like walked around in the park for a little, just jumped around on a bunch of stuff, looked at the out of order toilet. We managed to look into the onsen swimming pool as well, since they have a observation area for the swimming pool. That feels a bit like a creeper thing to have, but well, I mean, it gave us a good example, like a good review of what the swimming pool is like, and for the most part it looked like just your normal ordinary Olympic sized swimming pool. I'm not going to put a video here for obvious reasons. It really feels like it'd be a bit too creeper of a thing to have taken a video in there, but just a swimming pool, except I guess the water is from a natural onsen. And so we went back after all of that and continued our 3 hour plus journey back in time for dinner. Though we decided that since we were going to walk back, we would take a different route instead. And well, it was interesting. Like we would walk past quite a few agriculture areas as a result. And it was strange. I don't know if why this was done, but like we walked past multiple farm areas and there were just like crops buried in the snow, like entire heads of lettuce or like carrots just lodged in the ground in the snow, getting buried by it, like unplugged. Like, sadly, the areas were so deserted that there was really no one we could ask about this. I was very curious as to why this was being done. If you know something about that, just put it in the comments. I would love to know actually why, like, vegetables were just left out in the snow like that. Like, some of it wasn't even rotting. It still looked kind of fresh. So it was strange seeing all of that, but apparently someone was doing that in many farms across the mountains of Nagano. Then there were also the blue chickens, the blue cocks that we saw. Like, it might be a little hard to tell from the video, but like the cock's gizzard and the flap on the head, they're not red but blue instead, which was something I don't think I've ever seen before in my life at least. So after walking past a bunch of taken apart cars as well as a bunch of graves, they mentioned there were a lot of graveyards as well. Like, and I don't mean like small personal graves, but like in Japan, typically ancestral graves are quite common. So you have one very big grave for the family itself. But apparently there were a lot of those high up the mountain. Like when we were walking through the farmland past the shrines, or even just like residential areas, you would see like many very ornamental graves very high up in the mountains, which obviously I'm not gonna take a picture of video of respect, but like there were many of these all around the place, which I can imagine it being kind of creepy walking past like this kind of areas at night. Though thankfully it's all very high up the mountain, so it's typically not visible unless you're in this residential areas. But overall, this was most of what we saw on the mountain. A lot of it was just very wonderful scenery. I'll probably just leave it playing for a bit, even as I speak now and across the video as well. But yeah, ryoukan's in Japan are a very interesting thing. If you get a chance to visit one, I would highly recommend so. Maybe if you can find one in like Kyoto, Osaka, or even Nagano, it will be an even better experience. I feel like you will want to go to areas that are either more traditional in general or areas with a huge amount of onsen, since these areas would tend to have the more authentic and higher class ryoukan's in general. If you have someone who can read Japanese, I would recommend not going with what most English friendly websites would recommend, but searching for one within Japan on your own, because while that may be more difficult, I strongly believe you could get a more authentic experience closer to what a local would get, which would, if you're going to an onsen, I would recommend going for that authentic experience more, perhaps, than going to one that might be a bit more localized towards making it simpler, or like the culture a bit watered down to allow for more tourists to enter. I mean, of course, it has its own friendliness and ease of access and use when you go to those, but if you want the unique experience of something more authentic, I recommend perhaps going to one of these areas instead, or maybe somewhere even more remote. Like, that could always work out. I will be on the lookout to see if one day I could actually find one as well. But yeah, that's all for the story of how we spent 6 hours climbing up and down a mountain to eat pizza, and the wonderful ryokan experience that we got while we were there. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's very different from everything else on this channel so far. Like, most of it is like events and games related, so this would be very different and very infrequent, since being a salaryman, my pay doesn't really allow me to do stuff like this all too often, so then you won't see this type of videos as much, although I'll probably post it whenever I go somewhere weird or interesting, I suppose. If you like it, do let me know in the comments down below, or if you think there's anything I could improve about this video, or if you think it's shit and like a bit too watered down and simplified, do let me know as well. Thank you all for watching to this point. The next video would be the next Blue Archive Part 2 thing, and then from there I'm gonna have to start re-recording everything else as well, since everything is still in here right now. I need to see if it can be implemented in the first place, so that might take a little bit of time. For those of you who enjoyed this video, thank you. I mean, even if you didn't enjoy it, thank you for watching to this point. If you did, subscribe if you are interested in, well, maybe not videos like this, but more Japan related stuff in general, more weed related, I guess. I'll be heading off now, so take care and bye bye.